Welcome. This is our fourth Citation Labs webinar, and we are delighted to have you here today. Our topic today is PR for link building. Now, you know we like to experiment with formats. We've taken a lot of audience questions. Today, we're taking audience participation to a new level. We've actually got one of our previous question askers on the show with us today. We're absolutely thrilled and delighted to have James Clark of Adaptainer with us today. Now, he was registered for our webinar in November, and he submitted a question, wasn't able to actually hear it. He was on a plane at the time. Here are our answers. And Ken and I both just fell in love with his website, or the link and PR possibilities that his website presented to us. So we decided he'd be a great candidate to bring on for this. Now, some interesting info about James. He, at the age of 21, decided to leave the UK and strike out on his own, and he went to Saudi Arabia with $50 in his pocket, and apparently has thrived. He is in the finance industry now, and continues to take inspiration from his travels. Now, he's recently joined with his father and joined his shipping container business. Now, his dad has had this business for 25 years. So this is just, to me, just a fascinating. I hope one of my sons can help me out like this one day. But Adaptainer, it's a shipping company, a shipping container company, and James himself is a huge fan of architecture made from shipping containers. So this is a new sort of thriving, growing industry, and we're delighted to have him on today. Now, of course, we also have Ken McGaffin. Ken is in the 90s, the late 90s, started in link building. He's in his late 90s. So in the late 90s, he left the traditional PR and marketing world and started link building. So about the same age as when I was graduating from college. And his work and his clients have been featured on the BBC, New York Times, Financial Times, Marketing Week, Marketing Profs, Huffington Post, and of course Citation Labs. He's done consulting for a number of companies that most of our audience has heard of, I'm sure. Majestic SEO, BuzzStream, WordTracker, Skilled Up, and he has somehow found time to join us as our director, Citation Labs Director of PR Services, and we're just absolutely thrilled to have him as in our company. He writes a monthly column on Search Engine Watch, and one of his deepest passions is training and educating. And of course, he's going to lead us today in our conversation with James. So, Ken, I'm going to pass the mic to you, and welcome, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Garrett, for the wonderful introduction.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Garrett. That's wonderful. And James, it's lovely to see you.
It's great to see you. I've normally seen you in video courses that I've purchased over the months and years, Ken. So it's nice to speak with you live.
Great. Absolutely. Well, James, one of the things that I just when I got your question and had a quick look at your site, I have to say I was blown away just by the fantastic content that is there. I thought it's wonderful. And we're going to share some of my views of what that content is. And then we're going to look at, well, content in itself is not enough to get you good PR. And so what I want to do is look at some of the principles and some of the tactics that we can pull out that will be relevant to everyone who's listening to this about how you can start to get more media coverage. And of course, there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers. And in the final section of the webinar, we'll be looking at archetypal stories. Last time we covered 6 archetypal stories. I've got another 6 that we will run through. So that's going to be a fairly packed hour. So, James, if I could just ask, in terms of your experience of the website now and how you feel your business is on the web, can you give us a quick summary of that?
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, the company started out as a traditional shipping container brokerage 25 years ago, and lately it's become very fashionable to convert these containers into things other than shipping boxes. So, homes, for example, offices, well, we've done a project recently, which I'm hoping that we can focus a little bit about in the webinar, where we converted a 42 shipping containers into a huge marketplace in London. So, you know, we've got some really exciting projects that we've been involved in, but we haven't lived up to what we want to achieve in terms of PR on those projects. We need to get the word out more. So I'm hoping that we can get some great ideas from you and some brutally honest feedback on perhaps what we've done wrong and how we can improve it.
Okay, well, let's see. Let's get into it. And James, you can heckle at any time. Fire in, ask questions as I'm going along.
May I heckle, Ken?
Pardon?
May I heckle?
You always heckle, Garrett.
Ah, yes.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, let's just share the screen. Are you now seeing the presentation there?
Yes.
Yeah, I see it. Yep.
That's great. Well, here's the home page, and I love this. More than 50,000 containers delivered. You know, great value shipping containers. That's great. And of course, a great call to action there. Get a fast online quote. So there's some great stuff immediately on the home page. And as you scroll down, it's just evident that there is a lot of great content here. Here's, for instance, a summary of the blog posts that are there. And as you scroll down the page, it's visual, it's interesting. And James talked about this project here, the new Watford market, which was an outdoor market that was refurbished or rebuilt completely using 44 shipping containers. Now, I researched the PR into this particular story and got a fair amount of local coverage, but it didn't really get, I thought, the national coverage that it really deserved. Now, again, let me pick out some of the great things about the site that I thought were really wonderful. First of all, getting this top project on the home page is a great idea. And when you click through to that, you get taken to a short promotional video. I'll not run it at the moment, but we'll put the link up in the notes afterwards so you can have a look at this. But it's a short video. It's professionally shot. It's done really, really well. There's lots of stuff that I like about this. And James, one of the things that I would say in here is you do something terrific in this little video, and that is building a visual picture with words. And
right.
I love this. Building with containers is like building with Lego bricks. Now,
yeah, it was a great quote. Yeah.
Fantastic. Because what it does is it creates a picture in people's head, a visual picture of what it's like. They can imagine moving those Lego bricks around. So here was another example for me of something that's really strong on the site. So this is just terrific. Now, again, I'm going to move on a little quickly, and then we're going to come back and look at these things. The next thing is a thing called Grand Designs, which my wife and myself are addicted to. It's an architecture program that looks at, funnily enough, grand designs and projects, and it takes one every week and then goes into it in a 1-hour program. It's a fantastic program. And James, you were actually featured on that. Could you tell us how did that happen?
Let me correct you there, Ken, because actually we weren't featured on the show. What happened is that no, it wasn't ourselves. There was a guy in Northern Ireland that decided to build one of these homes out of shipping containers. So he contacted a local architect. He is an architect himself.
All right.
He contacted a local container conversion company to help him do that. And the English TV channel, Channel 4, they actually came out and they made this documentary about, you know, the house coming together. Really great show, and you can watch the video on our website. So I knew that was going to be on Channel 4 a week ahead of time. So I decided that I would blog about it. So we actually put out the blog the night the TV show aired, with you know, this video that people can watch. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to obviously, you know, benefit from some of the interest
Sure.
that people would have. And so we got a, you know, we got a Google ranking on page 1 for that keyword phrase, and you know, obviously that meant that we got some inquiries coming through. So that, you know, there's a little bit of a PR stunt that we pulled there off the back of something else that we weren't involved in.
All right, piggybacking on something.
A little bit naughty, but yeah, it's. I'm sure you're used to this kind of thing, Ken.
I've done it. Yeah, absolutely. So this on the program, it's a great story, and it really goes to there. So it's a popular show, and as James says, you can see that video on the website. Now, one of the other things, and listen, I picked this out, and I thought this was really good, James, in terms of, I'll look at the projects that you have done on the website, and the variety is fantastic. Now, for me, it's fantastic because it involves lots of different sectors. So from education right through to business to the local government with the Watford market, through to eco-friendly buildings, etc., etc. Is really good in terms of, and I think I've picked out there 8 different sectors that you're addressing and represent your marketplace. Now, this is tremendous because we'll come back to this, because you can gear your stories to each of these markets. So rather than just having one large story, if you have a number of stories gained or aimed in turn at your important markets, then your chances of publicity go way up. So that's, I think that's an excellent way to do that. So those are great stories there. Now, James, however, we've had the talk, and you said so at the start. The site has not yet reached the level of media coverage that really the concept deserves. And I think that's one of the things that came through to me. And again, what I'm going to do is just talk about what I think are the reasons for that. But first of all, I'm going to talk about 2 things. That the online PR, and indeed any PR that you do, has to really meet 2 conversion objectives. And the first one is, of course, to persuade the media to write about you. That's the most important thing as you're starting off. So that's conversion task number 1. You've got to get great ideas and present them in such a way that a journalist is interested in them and then has the ability to write something terrific about you. So that's conversion task number 1. Conversion task number 2 is, of course, to get published and then to get read by potential customers. When they read about you and you meet in the media, you then want them to come and visit your site. And once they've come to your site, then you want to convert them into paying customers. And until you've actually achieved those 2 objectives, your PR's really not working. So I would keep those 2 conversion tasks very clearly in mind. Does that resonate with you, James?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is very, very good advice.
Okay. Well then, let's look at what I'll call the golden rules of PR. And that is, first and foremost, that great content on its own is not enough. And you know, that happens to a lot of people either that I'm teaching about PR or consulting from. It's not enough just to have great content, because you've got to hone that content. You've got to convert it into digestible stories, and that really is the trick. And I think from people's comments that they send in, that's one of the hardest jobs, is how do you take what is good content and make it newsworthy. So that's one of the things that we're really going to look at, and look at, I hope, in some detail. So golden rule number 1 is great content is not enough, and you've got more work to do. It's a brilliant start, as we can see here in terms of what you're doing, James, but it's not enough. The second thing, golden rule number 2, is it's people who make great stories. And again, some of the questions or comments that we've had in are, what happens when my industry is so boring, there's no news story there? Well, to tell you the truth, I've come across industries that are difficult, but I've never come across industries where there's no PR story. And why is that? It's because there's always people. So there's an entrepreneur behind the business, and there's customers who buy from that, and there's people who like and write about that topic. And when you put those together, there are always great stories. And there's a journalist who I picked up about 10 years ago, had a great quote, and it was that every business has a story to tell. And I really couldn't agree with that more. So no matter what your business is, there are people in that business. Yourself, your employees, and the people that you're selling to. And there is newsworthy stuff in there. What you need to do is pull that out. Okay, so that's golden rule number 2. Golden rule number 3 is you need to think like a reporter thinks. Now, lots of people think that a reporter does the hunting out of stories and actually goes and looks for them. It's not quite the case. That's not really what happens. Reporters now are under a tremendous amount of pressure. They have to create stories in a very short period of time. And so one of the things that you have to do as a PR person is create the stories for them. That means you've got to do everything so that they can come to your website, your press center, or they read your press release, and they have everything they need to create a story. If they have to work hard at it, if they have to come and dig, then they're going to be less likely to do it. So,
Ken, can I just come in there for a second?
Yeah.
So just in terms of what we need to provide to the reporter, could you just break that down? I mean, in my own mind, I'm thinking, quotes, for example. So maybe in the case of our Watford video, if we'd had some interviews with the market stall holders there, that's something that a reporter could have used.
Absolutely.
But I'm just wondering if what else we should be looking to get as well for the reporters.
Right. Okay. Well, that's the start of it in terms of thinking. What is it that the journalist will need to make this story work? Now, when you look at the video about that market, one of the things about it is a great promotional piece, and it's professional standards, etc., etc. But it tells no stories. It doesn't take, say, a stallholder in the market and ask that stallholder, well, what was it like before? And what's it like now? So if you went and did vox pops in the market and went round, in half a day, you'd have wonderful material for a PR piece. And think of this. This is not material that the journalists could go and get themselves because they just don't have time to go off with a video camera.
Yep.
So if you do it for them and provide them with that material, then they're much more likely to use it.
Okay.
And they're going to say something like, gosh, the impact it had on that person who owned that stall, brilliant.
Yep.
But also, how about when the opening's there and talking to some of the customers? Well, what do you think of the market now? Wow, it's brilliant. Gosh, you should have seen what it used to be like. And now this is what happened, and this is what I bought today, and stuff like that. So you can start seeing that the enthusiasm starts to come across. And it's human stories that we're after. the human story of the person behind the stall and the human story of the people who are buying the products. And that really is crucially important.
So that's enough. That's enough to get in with a reporter is to have the contacts on the ground.
Yes, one of the things that you've got to do is, and here's what I mean by thinking like a reporter. Okay, how would a reporter think? Okay, what we want to do is we want to create a story. Yeah, it's a good news story about this new market and stuff like that. It's great. But I wonder how it impacted people. You know, I wonder how the stallholders thought about it. So the journalist's going to think about that. He's also going to think, what about the customers, et cetera, et cetera. And in terms of controlling your PR, you've got to think about that. Oh, that's how they would construct the story.
Yeah.
So my press release is going to have a bigger chance of success if I include a little piece, a link to some videos, and say you can get some exclusive content here, interviews with people, etc., and then even tell that story for them. So the journalist has got everything they need to do the story.
Wonderful. We actually have that, so it's just a case of getting it edited and put up. So that's really good.
Yes, that I think is really important, and one of the things that I think about your site is when you look at the press page doesn't immediately grab you. So those stories are not there. What you have is, right, here's James, here's my address, here's my contact details. Now that's important, of course it is.
Yeah.
But hey, the press page is where you show that you can tell a good story, that you understand what a good story is, and that you say, subliminally or otherwise, to the journalist, listen, mate, you are going to have an easy time here because I've done all your work for you.
Yeah.
And then they're going to love that. And so it also gives you a lot more control as well. So, because if you're giving good material to a journalist, well, then they're not going to get the wrong idea, or they're not going to go off on a tangent. You can control that to a very large degree.
So just for the people on the webinar, on our press page at the moment, we basically have an About Adaptainer text on there and a link to a video about how shipping containers are made, which Ken quite rightly said in the past is not really something that's going to grab a journalist's attention. But I'm just wondering, what should we have on there? Should we have that Watford video? Should we have other conversion project videos that we've done in the past on the press page? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, absolutely. I've looked at your blog archives, for instance, and that's exactly the model that you should have for your press page.
Got it. Okay. Yep.
A good headline, a little image, and a little story.
Right.
You know, but of course that story is different from a blog piece because it's an editorial. So you just got to massage it that little bit more. But the journalist comes along and says, "Oh wow, gosh, they've been covered in the New York Times, for instance. Oh gosh, there was an interview on the FT.com, Financial Times website." Because one of the things that does is it raises the level of trust that the journalist has in you.
Yep.
They don't want to be sold a line, if you like. And if other media has written about you, then they're going to be much more likely to write about you in the future. So it's important to build that trust up. And you don't build that trust up by saying, we are such and such, and we are this and this, and blah, 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 blah. You build it up and say, hey, what about this for a story?
And maybe this is... Maybe this is something for another webinar, but I don't know if it's possible for you to quickly summarize the key difference between copy for a blog post and an editorial, because you mentioned there was a difference between the two, and I'm just wondering what that difference is, if you can summarize it.
Okay, summarizing it, a blog post might be my personal opinion of how I feel about my business or what I've done in the business, etc. It's written very much in a personal way. When I switch to writing for the press, well, the publisher is really objective. So they're not just writing a blog post to promote your business. They're writing a good story. And their duty is not to your business, it's to their readers and to the editor.
Okay.
That's who their priority is. And you've got to imagine that you're doing exactly the same thing. You're writing for that editor.
Yep. So learn from the BBC.
So, yeah, absolutely. Learn from the BBC, the Mornington Mercury, or whatever it might be. Just read good newspapers, and you will get that insight right in that way. And I think the way that I would do it is, you know, when I was doing PR full-time, one of the things that I loved was when journalists took my complete story and just reprinted it. And that it's amazing how often that happens. But once you do that, then it is it's terrific to see that, and that you do have some level of control. Now, you've just reminded me of another little story I did on we got radio coverage for a diaper delivery company. This is many years ago when they first arrived in Ireland, and I got this wonderful piece on Saturday morning on the radio, because that's when we thought mums and dads would be listening, and people with young children and stuff like that. And it was great. We did this fun piece, and it was really good. Brilliant. Okay, so that was a piece of work well done. However, what I thought about the following Monday, that wasn't the Saturday, and the following Monday, let's think about it from the media's point of view. So they had the client on. It was a good piece, lots of fun, and good music and stuff like that. It was a really nice experience. So what did I do? I phoned the producer on Monday and said, hey, you'll never believe the reaction we had. It was just phenomenal. We sold out with blah, 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 etc., etc., etc. So we really built it up that the PR had a real impact on the business. And then I said to the producer, would you like us to come in next Saturday and tell you how we got on? Oh, what a good idea, he said. And so we got another bite at the cherry. So if I hadn't been thinking of what's in it for the journalist, what's in it for the radio station, then I wouldn't possibly have come up with that story. Because by bringing us back in, not only was he giving us great publicity, but he was saying to his audience, hey, we're a really popular radio program, because so many people listened and so many people responded. We must be really good.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of thinking that you've got to get into, that, you know, reporters are driven by emotion just as well as the rest of us. And
so people,
you know, and for heaven's sake, that was a 5-minute call to pick up a second piece of major coverage. It was fantastic. You know, so this is not rocket science, not a difficult thing to do. So that's really important. Think like a reporter. Give the reporter everything they need to write a story. Now, a good way to think about this is, right, okay, if the reporter is interested in your company and they come to your press page, will they get everything that they need to write the story? Like photographs of yourself. Will they get the company logo? Will they get a background information if they choose and want to read that? So you've got to think those things through and say, yes, even if the journalist comes to my site on Saturday night at 1 o'clock in the morning, he's going to get everything he or she needs to write a great story. Now, if you start delivering to journalists in that way, then they're going to love you.
Yeah.
And they're going to come back to you And again, there's nothing better when a story that you've got, or the journalist who's written a story about you in the past, rings you up and says, "Remember me? I wrote about you last year. I've got a little spot. Would you be able to tell me about such and such?"
Yeah.
So if you make their time easy, then it's fantastic, because they're going to take more from you, and then they're going to come looking for you. So think of the poor reporter and what they need to make the story, and give them everything.
Got it.
Now, the other thing in there is, of course, variety of stories, and we did talk on the call, and I talked in the last webinar about planning your PR, and it's always a good idea to plan ahead. We would try to plan one major story per month, and you might think that's hard. It's not really hard to do that. You think of anniversaries, events happening in your company, you think of stuff happening in the industry, and then, hey, you're a creative guy. You could be coming up with creative ideas. I've seen contests on your site. I've seen lots. You've got lots of ideas.
Yeah, we just need to put them into play.
It's one of the things that's really important. When I look at your site, there's no shortage of ideas. It's just, well, let's isolate those ideas and build them up in synergy. So this month we're going to concentrate on that market in Watford. The month after that we're going to do that story about the schoolhouse. Hey, the month after that, let's go to that restaurant. Tell you what, I'll take a reporter to the restaurant. I'll invite them along in your busy time. Would you like to take a quick lunch break? And we'll go and visit a container restaurant, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing that a reporter will say, "Oh, okay, that sounds interesting. I'll bring a cameraman." And there you are. And again, one of the major PR successes I had was actually staging. I think I mentioned this in the last webinar at all, in terms of legislation was changing in health and safety at work. And what we did was create an image of a computer and a workstation before the legislation and what was required after the legislation. So we were thinking like a reporter. Mm-hmm. They would love to show the before and after. And that's what we did. And that got us full page coverage in a couple of newspapers. It got us a couple of TV stations, etc., etc. So just being attuned to what the news medium needs and providing that for them, that's the way. Do it in an organized way, and you're away.
Are there particular resources that you'd recommend for discovering how you would get in tune with the reporters, with what they want?
Yes. So one of the things that I would use would be Feedly, an RSS reader. So that's Feedly. And what you can do is you can subscribe to newspaper or reporters' RSS feeds. Now, what that means is that first thing in the morning, you open up Feedly, and there's a list of all the stories that your target journals have published overnight. And of course, you can just read through that all in one place, and you can tweet, you can contact the journalist. You get a great feel for what they write about. And now most journalists will have their own archive on a newspaper, and so you can click on their name and you'll see the articles that they've written beforehand. Yes. So you get to understand what approach they take, what they like, what they tend to write about, and you can couch the stories in that particular way. So all of that is available, but it's really about getting into the head of the journalist and doing that. Okay, do their job for them. Okay, so let's then move on to the next. And I think this is really important. Golden PR rule number 4. adapt your stories for different markets. Now, we've talked about, 8 different markets. Now, if you send out just one press release, yeah, you've got a chance of being covered. But if you go the further step and really adapt your story, so for instance, say you're doing a special design offer or whatever, you have a basic press release for that. Well, you could include local government example and send that to the local government press. You could include a restaurant and send that to the restaurant press, and so on. So I don't normally send out just one version of a press release. I send out several, each adapted to specific markets. And of course, when you do that, guess what? You're going to increase your opportunities for coverage. So adapting stories is just a brilliant way of doing that. And then,
Ken, can I just stop you just very quickly? Going back to the press releases.
Yep.
I mean, most people in SEO, used to know that it was a great thing to do back in the day. Do journalists still, do they pay attention to these press releases? Is it worth doing? Because it costs a lot of money.
Right. Okay.
One of these out.
And I presume you're talking about PR distribution.
Yeah, these press releases you can send on PR web, for example.
Right. Okay. The way that I look at that, and I have 3 groups, and I use PR web and PR newswire as the 3rd category in that, i.e. I'm sweeping up with that. And let me explain it. So what are the 3 groups of journalists that I have? The first group are journalists who have written about my client in the past. That's number 1. Those are going to be your top targets because they've clearly said they're interested in you. They've written about you in the past, so they know you. And so if you're coming to them with a new story, your chances of success are so much higher. So that's group number 1. Group number 2 is journalists who you've carefully researched. So you've looked at your target journals, you've seen the type of person who writes, say, about architecture or home offices or whatever it might be. You've done the research. You don't know the people, but you've done the research and you know what they write about. And because you know what they write about, then you can make a pitch to them. Yeah. And you know that that pitch has got a likelihood excuse me, of being covered because it's intensely relevant to that journalist. So those would be my top 2 approaches. Then the third, when I do PR web or PR newswire or business wire, it's an email blast almost, because you're sending it out, and you should see, I get these emails coming in every day, and there's a list of 200 or 250 stories. Now, you've got to really have something special to stand out from that. So the chances of getting coverage are much lower. I think research would show about 8% of the stories come from those sorts of newswire stuff. But it's still worth doing because it's almost a fishing expedition, because you're sending it out to all of those journalists. Some of them will bite, and of course when they do bite, they then become one of your top contacts because they've written about you. Okay? So that's the priorities. Journalists who have written about you in the past, journalists you carefully researched and can make a personal pitch to, and then third is the news release distribution services.
I particularly sorry, I was just going to say I particularly like the idea of researching and reaching out with personalized pitches to journalists that are relevant to the story. And I've heard of platforms like Focus that help you identify those journalists and reach out to them. Are there other ways that you would recommend to do it? Because that, again, that software is very expensive for people starting out.
Oh, okay. Yes, Focus is expensive, and it ties you into a 1-year contract. So you know you're paying maybe in the region of about $3,000 a year for that. And so that is expensive. The second one, and I think it's underused, and I've written about it in the past, and that's Muckrack, muckrack.com. And what it does, it's a huge database of journalists on Twitter. And what you can do is you can search that by beat, i.e. the subject they cover, or by keyword in terms of what they've written about on Twitter. And these are all journalists who have opted in, who said, right, okay, we're on social media, we think it's important, yet we want to share our details with Muckrack. And then through that, you can then pitch journalists who've tweeted about the topic that you're writing about. Now, that costs $199, approximately £120 a month for that. So if you're doing one-off projects, that's a great way to do it.
Perfect.
Yeah, and you know,
I'm gonna interrupt just briefly. You could also try a quick Google search in Google News. So you go to news.google.com and type in title : quotes shipping container.
Okay.
You can also adjust the. I'm getting a bit of an echo, so I'm turning my volume down. I don't know if that helps or not. Perhaps, Ken, briefly, could you try muting yourself? Or
yeah,
just briefly.
Okay.
Is anyone else hearing the echo? Sorry to diverge.
And now it's gone.
Okay, brilliant. So you can go directly to news.google.com, do an in-title search, and you'll find stories on whatever topic you're looking for. You do have to be careful when you're searching for in-title, but that's in our experience in searching for press opportunities. Usually the reporter is, if the topic or the subject is in the title, then that is going to be an article that is about that subject. So you could amass a list of people who have written about shipping containers in the past, and from there be able to pick and choose some folks as well. Not quite the same as people who have tweeted about it. So there's going to probably be more journalists who have tweeted about a shipping container story than people who have actually written them. So you know it's you're may not find as many, but you're able to be pretty targeted about it as well. You can search for people who have searched for who have written shipping container stories in the past year, so or the past year, or the past month, or the past week. So folks who have just recently written about stuff, you can find that way as well. So Google News search can be a phenomenal way to look for those opportunities. We do the link prospector tool that Citation Lab operates and rents or sells on a monthly subscription basis, can search at scale in Google News. So if you wanted to amass, if you had a number of keywords that you thought were indicators of an interested reporter or reporters written about a given topic. For example, if just the word shipping, you wanted anybody who's written about shipping in the past month or the past year, you could find those folks as well, and kind of put a bunch of queries together at once and find the targets that way. We can perhaps have a bit of a webinar in the future about that, and would love to have you back on, James, if you'd be willing. We could go through it again.
Wonderful.
But I'll go back to mute and thank you for letting me share that a little bit. But it's just a quick and easy way to just poke around in Google. One note is definitely use the in-title advanced operator, because a lot of times Google will index a news story that perhaps has a list of other news stories on the site that is in a sidebar, but it will count the occurrence of that keyword and say that page is about that topic. So you really have to limit it with the in-title operator, and you'll be able to search Google News very effectively for reporters who've written about your target subjects.
Got it. I got some of those Citation Lab credits to use up, so
there you
anytime
go.
you're ready, let's do it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Next week. Thank you. Ken, back to you. Thank you. Oh, you might be muted, sir. You're certainly muted.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute Ken at the moment.
It's usually not a problem.
No. Hold on here.
Is Ken muted by himself, or did you mute him, Megan, for sure?
We muted him, and let's see. Hold on.
Oh dear.
Ken, I'm actually going to ask you to just leave the webinar and come back in, because I think you have been. Apologies for that.
Whoa, I could take this opportunity to show. Let's take a quick look over at Google News just to poke around. This is one of my favorite things when it comes to prospecting and sort of opportunity discovery. So I'm absolutely not a PR person, which is why we have Ken involved. I am very much obviously a PR enthusiast, and I believe in it. And I'm, of course, a student of Ken's, but one of the things I really enjoy doing is when I've got a topic that I think that is newsworthy or that there could be stories around, is I'll just start poking around to see what has been written about in the past in Google. So I'll just briefly throw that on. I'm going to share my entire screen and click share here and go over to Google News. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I just want to reiterate how important in title is. And then in quotes, we'll just do shipping container.
Hi, Ken, can we hear you now?
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Absolutely. So just real quick, Ken, I was demonstrating, and thank you for your patience with us, Ken, and audience, of course, too. So a quick in-title shipping container search on Google News shows us, for $2,000, a stylish DIY shipping container home. So this is, this starts to get really interesting, right? Tiny shipping container home that doesn't skip on space. Shipping container home. So this is all shipping container home stuff. This is so exciting. So we can go to search tools here and adjust this. So the past week, stories from the past week. So these folks have just recently written about it. So they might be more likely or more open to to pitches. I don't know. Ken would be the one who would know if that indicated a higher interest. But I think the recency, someone who's recently written about it, might be a better or a different type of target. So anyhow, just remember this, folks. In title, colon, and then definitely put your concept in quotes. You can adjust it. Shipping containers. So since we had it in quotes, Google's being very, very precise and specific. So this is still from the past week, and now there's even more stories with shipping containers. And it really, James, if you guys are hiring, let me know, because it really looks like this is a growing industry right now.
Oh, Garrett, we have to talk, yes.
Cheers. I'm going to stop sharing now and pass the mic back to Ken. Thank you, Ken.
Okay, that's grand. Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen now again. Okay, how are we now? Can people now see my presentation?
Yeah, I can see the slide, Ken.
Yep. I'm going to assume that you can see the slide. Okay, and now we're on to golden rule number 5, which is the shorthand for this one is steal everybody else's stuff in terms of get great ideas from people who have published great ideas. There's inspiration all around you, and there's nothing wrong with copying a story or copying an idea or whatever. This happens all the time. So really, get inspiration from what other people are doing, and the way that I talk about doing that is by switching. So you take something from one industry and you switch it to another. And now for me, this is really one of the most important things that I do. James, you were talking about Feedly, or we were talking about Feedly, and it's the first thing that I do every morning is spend about an hour on Feedly looking at all the feeds that I've got coming in And that gives me great inspiration, great articles to share on social media and stuff like that. And it really keeps me on top of the industry. The other thing it does, it gets me fired up and excited about what I'm doing. So that's great. Are people hearing me okay?
Yeah, no
Yes.
problem.
Oh, good. Okay, so let's just look at some examples of how we might do this. And again, we talked about this, James. Look at other stories in your industry. And again, we'll give a link in the notes tomorrow on this. 7 homes built with shipping containers. Now, this tells me wonderful things. First of all, it tells me that the media is, of course, interested in this sort of stuff, these types of stories. So that's positive affirmation. And it also shows you that, gosh, there's other ways of getting this across. So what you can do is you can go through these 15 slides in all in terms of that's doing that. And James, one of the things that you might do there is just a slideshow of your own industry. And if you thought about it in terms of, right, there was 8 sectors you served. So if you had a slideshow with 1 photograph per sector, that's a great way of getting your message across. So look at other stories in your industry and see what people are writing about, how they're writing about it, and then see what you can do better. So that's a great thing to do.
In fact, I mean, we have relationships with other container architects
Oh, yeah.
around the world that have done some really great projects, as well as ourselves. So, I mean, with something
Brilliant.
like this, would you recommend reaching out to them, using some of their image assets as well as ours?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. You know, that sort of collaboration can be tremendous. As long as there's mutual interest there, that could work really well.
Yeah.
So if you can think that through, great. And having relationships with competitors is a great thing. Now, one other thing I would do is look at similar industries. And I've done work in the past with the tiny house movement in the US. And that's what attracted me to your site as well, because I thought, oh, it fits in there. And tiny houses, again, it could be a similar industry to container housing, for instance. And as we see, just I did this search on Google News this morning, over 2,000 news stories. And you can look through this for opportunities, but also for ideas in terms of what are being covered. And I talked before, I think, to you about a site called tumbleweedhouses.com, who do tremendous PR. They're a small company, but fantastic PR that they do. And like yourself, great content creation. So you can learn by looking at all of these people's. And one thing that link builders are brilliant researchers. So the whole audience listening to this, you know that you can get this type of information, get inspiration from it, and then turn it to your own advantage. And then the final part that I'm going to talk about is, of course, looking at archetypal stories. In the last webinar, we looked at 6. So I want to look at another 6. And we'll just do it very quickly and then take some questions and answers. Okay. First of all, archetype number 7, international sales. Journalists of all kinds are interested in international sales. And in this one, it's Etsy is the site that's featured. And what they did was they took one of the craft businesses that they support and host and did a story of someone living in Brighton, in Boston, and did a story around that, and of course had that published in the Boston Globe. So, James, I think that's a bit of an example of what we were talking about a story that is geared to a local market. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So, anybody getting international sales, particularly a small business, that's newsworthy. So that's the sort of thing that you can look at. The thing with archetypal stories is, well, you want to learn from them. And couch your stories in the same sort of way so that they fit into that type of model. Okay, the next one, which is a great one, I love this, is an overview or a roundup. And this is the sort of story where you get into through helpareporter.com, because what the roundup does, well, there's a couple of ways that you get. This roundup here featured 10 companies, and I've just highlighted one of them there. They give a link to each of the businesses. How do these stories happen? Well, a journalist might put out a query on Harrow, wanting, in this case, businesses who'd got a great story to tell about their business plan. That's what this article is about. So that's one way of doing it. The second way is that journalists use Google. So they would have searched for companies that might fit the bill here. And so if you've done your optimization, if you've got your content there that's of interest, then you can end up in these types of stories. Another way of doing it is a journalist reads about you from other coverage that they've got. So that's that overview or roundup story. Harrow is the simplest way to get those, and there's always opportunities in Harrow. And Garrett, one of our favorites is survey results.
Oh, yes.
Because the beauty about survey results is they include numbers. People like numbers. Journalists love numbers. People love reading about numbers. It's just a fact. So it's one of the great things that surveys do. The other thing about it is, if you're lucky, it's one of the top things that journalists will link back to. You've created a survey. Well, we're not going to publish the full survey, but hey, we'll provide a link to the further information, and that's helpful. So survey results are also a great way of doing this. A health problem, solving a health problem. Hey, your desk will save you. Here's how. Garrett, do you still stand up?
I'm standing as I speak now, Ken. Yes.
Yeah, you started that at what, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
About 2 years ago, I have not looked back. I do have a little bit of a stool now that I lean against while I'm working sometimes just to take a rest. But absolutely, I love standing up. It's changed my work life. I'm more energetic, and I actually even lost a little bit of weight. So it was.
So there you are. You see, everybody's got stories to tell, Garrett. That's brilliant. That's the sort of detail we would want to go into a piece like this.
Great. Some people just like to talk also, like me, so I don't know if it's a story or not. But
take it from me, it's a story. So that's number 10. Number 11, and I just love this, where they feature an advertising campaign. And again, we see this all the time in the marketing press and the business press and just the general press. And this one was a fantastic one from Always, the tampon manufacturers. And it was about that phrase, like a girl, and what does it mean? And the basis of the campaign is when somebody uses that phrase, oh, you run like a girl, it's a criticism. It's a negative thing to say. And what the campaign highlighted is this is not the right way to do it. And what it did was turn that on its head and then look at a positive interpretation of what it was like to be a girl. It was a fantastic campaign, and it did extremely well. So coming up with a unique ad campaign, even if it doesn't get, even if you haven't invested a huge amount in it, can get you great coverage as well. And then the final one that I'm going to talk about here is just archetype number 12, which is lists. And you know, link builders love lists, so do journalists. And this one's from the San Francisco Chronicle. And as you say, it's by a company called Flex Jobs, who really just looked at their own customer base to pick out the 10 highest paying work from home jobs. And James, that again is something that you can do, I think, in your business. Just look at your own customer base, and I'm sure there are stories there.
Yeah.
You know, I got coverage of a story like that in the Financial Times. It's a great way. So, and anybody listening, look at what stories you can pull from your client's customer base. Great story potential there as well.
Okay.
And then, okay. So what we'll do is now take some questions and answers. And I'm very happy to do that. What I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen. There we are. And we'll take any questions. Now, we had a couple of questions. Megan, do you have those questions there, the 3 that we picked out? Just from the spreadsheet, do you remember people's survey? No.
She's muted. Megan, you're muted right now.
Oh, right.
Yeah, hold on 1 second.
Let me just pull that out. Okay. I've got them in front of me now. Okay, and they're just... Oh yeah, there was a great one from Link Moser. I hope you don't mind me using your name. And it was asking about, puts a lot of work into creating a quarterly report about New Hampshire property prices. And he asked, well, how can we help the media with story ideas, educational content to generate traffic? And one of the things that I thought, and I looked at this publication, and it's clear to me that a lot of work has gone into creating it. It's a beautifully produced little online booklet, I think of maybe about 24 pages or so. Now, what struck me about that book, and the very first thing that I would say to you in terms of how that could be improved, is in reports like this, nearly everybody writes an introduction and nobody reads it because they move on to the meat of the story. And what you've done in this publication is write a summary of the whole report in that introduction part, which people won't read and reporters will miss as well. So again, it comes back to the idea of thinking like a reporter. And how I would improve that particular publication is take that introduction and make it into a press story. So actually write a commentary on, and this is what we found this quarter. And that would be a big thing to do on that. So I think that would, not only could you publish that in the report, you could use that as the basis of a news story. Okay. Right, I'm going to take another one. What's the best approach for securing PR? Emails just seem to get ignored. Is it persistent to pick up the phone, having sent an email, or is that just annoying and dumb? Perhaps if the emails work, they'll either run with the story or they won't. And this is a perennial question. My approach to it is that follow-up is really important. So I would pitch the story by email. If I haven't got a reply, I would then send them a quick reminder the next day, but I wouldn't be pushy. I'd just hope you got the story about such and such. If I can help you, let me know. And that's it. And just send one follow-up reminder, and that would be it. Now, it's important to do that follow-up because that nearly always leads to more stories. It will increase the percentage of coverage that you will get. Now, should you do that by phone? It really depends on the journalist, but all the research in this area will say that 90% of journalists do not want to get phone calls, and they'll be annoyed if they get pitched by phone. Funnily enough, I was late last year interviewing a travel editor who I've done work with in the past, and he just loves getting phone calls. So he's one of the 5% of journalists who do love phone calls. And the reason he liked it was because it was immediate. And he could immediately tell what the person is like, etc., etc. And so the simple answer to you, listen, take it as a rule that most journalists don't like phone calls. So keep it to an email conversation. If, however, you get a sniff that someone doesn't get annoyed with phone calls, then it can be a very personal and a great way of getting in touch. So you pay your money, you take your chance. You can play it completely safe, or try and do a little bit of research and find journalists who are interested in being contacted by phone. They do exist, and if you can identify them, it will help you. Okay, and
Okay,
the third
sorry,
question.
just quick question, Ken.
Yep.
While we're talking about the protocols of reaching out to journalists, I think you said earlier that you recommended reaching out to journalists directly with a press release. Would you have that as an attachment on the email, and then a sort of a pitch in the body copy of the email as well?
It's a pitch in the body copy. Don't send attachments. Definitely do not send attachments. Send an email. If you want people to then read a little bit more, link back to the press release on your own website. And you can keep that private if you like. But what you should try and do with your email, it's really important to have a great subject line, and it should be something that intrigues them. Oh, right. Oh, gosh, that's interesting. What could be in that story? And you've got to do it. Now, there's a difference between being obtuse, if you like, about what a story is. Don't hide what the story is about, but put an interesting hook on the story so that the journalist reads that and says, oh, I want to find out what that is about. So that's the way to do it. Don't try and be obscure, because the journalist won't answer it at all. Then once they open up your email, don't say, we are such and such and we do blah, 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 etc., etc. Forget all of that nonsense. Get right to the story and summarize your story in the first paragraph. And if you want to learn how to do that, look at most newspaper stories. And you'll find that if you read just the first paragraph, it's a summary of the whole story, and it sets it up. And that's the way that you should write your first paragraph. And then after that, keep it short and to the point. 300 to 400 words is what you want to keep it to. But just take out all the waffle, all the rubbish, just the news. That's what you want to include there. And of course, your contact details so that they can get in touch if they want to. Now, my journalist friend that I interviewed last year, the way that he liked it was just everything is there. I can just write the story now. That's great. And he doesn't need even to get in touch with you. Everything's there to do it. And that's the ideal. Okay. Any more questions on that?
I don't have any questions, but I was thrilled by looking at your archetypes, Ken.
Oh, good.
And some of them I think are pretty scalable. And I noticed a footprint in the stories. And so as a link builder, I look for footprints all the time that would indicate to me a link, a page that has links on it, or a page that contains outbound links in some form or fashion. So I'm always looking for footprints that indicate a specific type of opportunity or a specific type of something I'm interested in. And one thing I saw on the survey, of course, one of my favorite topics, but I noticed that the phrase "according to a survey by" was used frequently. Yeah. And so I began doing just some queries in Google News, according to a survey in quotes. Yep. And it's just absolutely fascinating. I think the range of types of surveys that are out there become really interesting. You can start to kind of pick apart which ones may have been marketing oriented, right? You can sort of start to see that.
Yep.
You can see which ones are led by government agencies, and I also noticed a few different variations to play around with, and I'll share these in follow-up. But according to a poll or a recent poll, according to a recent report, according to a recent study, so you could begin to tease apart all of these sort of standard phrases that journalists use when they're referring to some kind of big piece of content, essentially. So
absolutely, I have written extensively about surveys and their PR potential, and I'm working with one of the survey companies now to do a book on using survey results as a link building technique.
Sure. I hope to get an advanced copy of that too.
You will get an advanced copy. Now, funny enough, I've set up 2 Google alerts because that gives me more material than I could possibly handle, and that's according to a survey.
Oh.
And
no kidding.
The second one is survey says.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Survey says. And I just get a ton of stories every morning on that one. That's great material.
So you see a lovely range of just how surveys are being used and who cites them. It was like peeling back the lifting the lid or lifting the hood of a car. Just wow, this is amazing. So that's how it works. It was just a fantastic moment there. But I'll share. Ken had a couple good ones. Survey says. Recent survey is probably another good one. You just put these in quotes in our follow-up, either on our blog or in our email. I'll look for a few more, brainstorm out a few more for folks who really want to thoroughly excavate and see what's out there along these lines. But wonderful.
That's absolutely. Now, I've got a question in here from Lisa, who's preparing a survey for women at the moment.
Brilliant.
Going out to the subscribers, and she talks about the biggest challenge is that you never know if your story is going to be picked up, no matter how much effort you put into it. And that's exactly right. And I have no answer to that because I suffer the same thing. Everybody in PR suffers the same thing. So there's 2 things that you can do about it. The very first thing is to be consistent over time. You've heard me talk to James. 1 major story per month over a 12-month period. That's what you do, because that builds up your reputation. So you can never guarantee for definite that one is going to be a big success. But if you take that approach, you will know that if you're doing this stuff well, writing it well, you will get coverage guaranteed over a year period. So you've got to take that viewpoint. That's how to get picked up. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing is repurpose your content so that if it doesn't get picked up, then your effort hasn't gone to waste. You can perhaps turn your survey results into a infographic, for instance. You could turn it into a presentation, a piece of training, etc. There are lots and lots of different things that you can do with it. The other thing that you can do with it is you can take one of the issues, and maybe your news story didn't get picked up, but how about a week later, or maybe 2 weeks later, you could do a feature type article and pitch it just to one source. So it's a different type of article, but that means you are going to maximize your chances of success. But let me tell you, Lisa, there is no way to guarantee that you'll get coverage.
Can I have a quick question? Do you have a second? Do you have time?
Yes, I have indeed.
Yeah, okay. Because you were talking earlier on about how, when you're doing PR, you want to make sure as much as you can that it's relevant to your audience. Yeah. I came across a story on Yahoo News a few months back, last year sometime, and it was about this 11-year-old kid who had wanted to put a balloon into space. And it only cost, I don't know, $200-300 to go and buy the stuff to do that, but he didn't have the money, so he went to a local recruitment consultancy in Scotland, actually, which is close to you. Yeah, yeah. And so the recruitment guy put up the money. Anyway, fast forward 2 months, this balloon goes up into space, and for whatever reason, Yahoo News picks it up, and a load of other news outlets as well. And
Yep.
the balloon that went up into space had the recruitment guy's logo sort of on the camera because they filmed it as it went up, right?
Yep.
And so he was cited in Yahoo News and other news outlets just because of this $300 investment he'd put into it. Now, that's not entirely relevant to his customer base, but I mean, who would turn down that kind of opportunity to be cited on Yahoo? What do you think of that?
Yes, is the simple answer, and I'm not going to complain about that. In fact, that's wonderful if you get that sort of coverage. But what you've got to ask is, well, how much effort goes into that? Okay, a couple of $100 to sponsor or whatever, but there's also the time that's involved as well. And so one of the things that you might do, you might get coverage, you might be able to say on your site, as featured in the New York Times or something like that, but you're not really going to get business directly from that. So it's good to raise your profile. And, that can be a bit of fun, but it's not going to really give you substantial PR that's going to do the two conversion tasks that we talked about. So it might do the first conversion task, which is to get the media to write about you, but it doesn't do the second one, which is get the readers of that to buy your stuff.
Right.
And PR is fun as well. So listen, if you want to support and have a bit of fun by sponsoring a young guy, well, you could almost turn that into a story,
Yep.
So the recruitment company could be saying something like, we want the sort of candidates that take things by the scruff of the neck.
Yeah.
Don't take no for an answer and get out there and try. So you could switch it round into a story that's related to your business.
I love that. Investing in future recruits, so to speak.
Yes, So again, there's another. Garrett and I talk about this when we talk about link building, and the term we use is creative relevance, because in SEO and a lot of marketing, we can get very tunnel vision and just think, oh, this is the market that we're into. But if we get creative about it, gosh, there's so many different markets that we could serve, and you can be creative in that way. And I see, just a couple of minutes thinking, we've come up with a way where that story could be turned on its head and could really promote the business.
Now, if he recruits rocket scientists, all the better, because that kid there, I think, sounds like a future rocket scientist. For sure.
But we've got plenty of them in Scotland, by the way.
Brilliant. Guys, this has been absolutely fantastic. Before we wrap, any closing thoughts, any closing questions? Ken, James?
My final remark is, one of the things that I love doing about this is the live audience. So listen, guys, if you've got questions, if something comes to you in the next week, or the next month, or the next year, drop us a line and just ask the question. Ken@citationslabs.com will get to me, and we love to hear questions. And there's another brilliant quote that I hear, which is, there's no such thing as a stupid, sorry, that's what you get when you ad-lib here. The quote is actually, the only thing stupid about a stupid question is not asking it. So if you've got any questions in your head, ask, and we will do our best to answer it.
Some reporters may disagree with that quote, but I'll leave that to Ken to decide what are good questions for reporters or not. Listen, James, thank you so much for having us, for being on our show today. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me as part of what you guys are doing. It's been really, really useful, and I hope it's helped some other people as well.
Brilliant. We had a great time. We had a great time planning for it and prepping. It's just been fantastic. So thank you.
Okay, folks, and we will be writing a little blog post to follow up on this. I'll write some more about the new 6 archetypes that we've added, and of course there'll be a recording of this particular webinar. So thanks all.
There'll be a copy of this going out?
Yes, there will.
Perfect.
All right, gents. Cheers. And Megan, you can wrap now. Thank you.